I think the whole world might be lagging behind on the concept that in the entertainment world, fame equals money, because it doesn't anymore. But I don't blame people for thinking that, because as long as we can remember, in the entertainment world, fame has equaled money. If, say you were a musician and someone heard your song, it's because someone bought your song, either that person or someone they knew, or they heard it on the radio and you were getting radio play, making radio money. Whether or not those contracts were drawn up fairly, it doesn't change the fact that the public assumes that if you're famous, you were in situations that also dealt with profit. But those avenues have slowly, or quickly, died and have been replaced by social media platforms and streaming services. And on places like TikTok, you could become the most famous person in the world overnight and not make a dime. And when I see bands on there putting the same song and same video 60 times in a row in hopes that it catches on, it makes me think of the Underpant Gnomes. You didn't think I was going to pull that out, huh? If you don't know the Underpant Gnomes, it was a character, or I guess a group of characters on South Park. It was an early episode in which one of the characters, the kids, saw these little gnomes running around and taking everyone's underpants. And it drove him crazy that he was the only person every time that managed to be aware enough to spot them. And everybody else thought he was crazy. Well, eventually, he got the other kids to see the same thing. And they chased those gnomes down into an underground cave system where they confronted them. And the gnomes brought them to this bulletin board. I'll never forget this. And they showed them their 3-point system for their economy, which was taking the underpants. That was point 1. Point 2 was question mark. It was just blank. And then point 3 was profit. So they were stealing the underpants and they were going to make profit, but they just didn't know how. And, that's actually pretty close to how I see a lot of entertainers or content creators on social media nowadays, except you change number 1 to get famous. But the rest remains the same. Number 2 is question mark, question mark, question mark. 3 is profit. I think for most, it is sort of a Prince Charming situation where if they generate enough buzz, a company will contact them, issue them a brand deal, and then everything is just smooth sailing from there. However, I don't think that most people understand the amount of fame that they accrue on the internet now does not equal even a fraction of what they think they will earn in money. And that's because fame has become a cheap commodity. In fact, there are companies out there that will give it to you seemingly for free. So what's the catch? Well, for starters, let's take a look at this sliding scale. It's a sliding scale that goes from discoverability to profit. And on this sliding scale are all the websites, social media platforms, streaming services, whatever that you can think of that has to deal with either content creation or forms of entertainment. So let's start plugging this in, okay? What's a platform that gives you a lot of discoverability and not a lot of money? I would say TikTok would probably be the one that comes to mind for me. TikTok is pretty chaotic when it comes to its discovery algorithm. You could create an account and within a week, you could get 50,000 followers, 100,000 followers, no problem. But the problem is getting any sort of meaningful payment out of all of the fame that you're accruing there, okay? Similar with Instagram. It's kind of the same story. Not as bad, but maybe as bad, but I'll just put it over here. Twitter. Twitter's pretty bad. Spotify. Spotify has pretty good discoverability algorithms. However, their payout, just from a base standpoint, is horrendous. It's a joke. And if you want to opt into their special discoverability algorithms to push your music out there, they ask to take an additional 30% of your profits. So, but yeah, pretty bad. So if there are websites and platforms over here, then there has to be websites and platforms over here. So these are high discoverability, low profit places. Over here, obviously, then there will be high profit, low discoverability. So one I can think of, if we're going by the Spotify thing, is Bandcamp. Bandcamp takes, I forget, I think like 10% of your profit. I mean, don't get mad at me if I'm wrong about that. And then after like $5,000 of sales, they knock that down even more, which is really good. But good luck getting anybody to find your stuff there if you don't have a following already. So you have to bring people to the platform, okay? They used to have a much more robust editorial, but that got gutted a couple years back. So actually, I don't really know how they handle their editorial now. So let's just say you got to bring your audience. Apart from that, we also have Patreon. Patreon is similar in that they take, I think, a base of 8% for their what they offer. And again, that's really good. However, you have to bring your own people to Patreon. You have to get people to there. They offer you no discoverability. They just offer you the services to get payment from those you do bring to the platform. So similar thing. You also have something like, I don't know, a streaming platform like Twitch. Again, Twitch is not the place for people to find you. In fact, people without having any sort of presence elsewhere will stream for months, even years, and only have 2 concurrent viewers. So you do need to bring people, you need to make a fan base, or you need to make some attention somewhere else for yourself before you bring them to the platform. So it's the exact opposite. So obviously, if you're putting 2 and 2 together, what you want to do is you want to create a following here and then somehow get them over here. Here's a problem with that. Have you ever been on Instagram or Twitter and linked somebody something, or you saw a link and you clicked on it, especially if it was another social media platform or something like that, and it was like the worst user experience of all time? Here's what happens when you click a link on one of those apps. They won't actually redirect you to that app. What they'll do instead is they will open up a browser inside of their app that has none of your information, none of your browser cookies or anything like that. And they'll give you the base browser view of that link. Now, that is bad because, if you're given a link to watch something, it's going to be playing in that browser. It's like one of the worst experiences ever. So, you might be thinking, well, those people, these companies need to put their top guys on it and solve that. They need to fix that. Well, here's the thing. That is them fixing it. They don't want you to leave their platform. They know that if you were to take people elsewhere and you had your audience and you moved somewhere else that didn't have their discoverability algorithm, that you would make more money. And they don't want you to do that because they want to make money off of what you do. So I started a Patreon a few years ago. And from what I remember, trying to get my, decently sized audience from here over to here, it was brutal. And I know for a fact now that websites like Twitter, if you post a link that goes somewhere else, they actually try to kill your post before it even gets any chance to have traction because they don't want people leaving the platform. They are actively working against you to move your audience from A to B. And that is the rock and hard place that I think a lot of creators and entertainers find themselves in nowadays, where, they post their song 60 times in a row on TikTok and they have a following on TikTok now, but what are you going to do with it? How do you get them from a place where you make no money to a place where you make a decent amount of money, a fair amount of money? Another big problem with these two camps is if you're trying to get someone to go from here to here, the level of commitment that you're asking from them as a change is pretty big. For instance, if you subscribe to someone on Patreon, or if you watch someone on Twitch, or if you bought someone's album on Bandcamp, that someone takes up a lot more space in your head than if you were to follow them on TikTok or Instagram or Spotify. And that's the issue. While you are gaining audiences over here, the level of commitment that that audience has toward you could be the lowest common denominator possible. And I'll prove it to you. Think about the last time you scrolled for an hour on TikTok or Instagram. Can you tell me more than 2 things that you saw during that hour that you were on Instagram or TikTok? Can you even tell me one? I know that I can't. I regularly scroll Instagram and it's in one eye and out the other ear, or whatever the hell, whatever that means. But I don't attribute any of the enjoyment I get from being on Instagram to the individual creators. I attribute it to Instagram. I am loyal to going to Instagram and looking at whatever the world has to offer me. Now, if one of those people that I mildly enjoyed were to say, hey, why don't you go ahead and watch me on Twitch, or why don't you subscribe to my Patreon, or why don't you go to my Bandcamp and check out my my albums? I'm not very likely to do that because that's not why I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram to support individual creators. I'm on Instagram to be entertained by Instagram. So while you're over on these websites and platforms and you're accruing a big audience, how loyal are they? How interested are they to actually go from seeing you to supporting you? And I think that's the big problem that a lot of people are having right now. A lot of entertainers, a lot of creators are having that problem where they amass themselves here, but they can't get here because these are 2 completely different worlds. So if anybody's looking at this and seeing a big gap in the middle, congratulations, very observant. There has to be somewhere in the middle to bridge these 2 things, or even sever this and just make a shorter distance between discoverability and profit. And there's a website for that, and you're on it. Okay? Now, look, don't get your underpants in a bunch, gnomes. I understand that YouTube is not a perfect website. I know that just like any other major company, they're owned by, Google, Alphabet. I don't always necessarily agree with what they're doing. However, I cannot find another website on this scale, not a startup, not a promise, not, a concept that offers this much categorized, proven discoverability and profit for the creators. And I'm not just talking about AdSense. I'm also talking about integrated stores. I'm talking about letting you hyperlink things and letting you send viewers from one place to another. Their openness and their relatively neutral stance in allowing creators to monetize their work in ways that they see fit is a huge thing, and honestly necessary for anybody who's trying to make anything of themselves on the internet. Now let's take a look at this with this in mind now. So over here you have discoverability and no profit. Over here you have profit and no discoverability. And right here, you have the sweet spot. I drew a line up and down instead of an S, so that's going to be my T. I do that so much. Look at this shit. Anyway, I'm not a calligraphist or a calligrapher or however you say that. So if this is all discoverability and this is all profit, this has to have something in the middle. And, as somebody who's been making videos on here for a few years, I've found that it does. So if you're a creator or an entertainer, I don't care what you want to call yourself, whatever you want. If you are creating a channel on YouTube, right, it's not going to have the possibility of growing as fast as TikTok or Instagram. However, when you do grow it, the amount of money that you make from YouTube is more than TikTok and Instagram. And that's when you start to realize that it's not just all discoverability or all profit. What's happening is these websites, these platforms, they are promising you a certain level of discoverability and in exchange, you give them your profit. If these companies had their way, all of us would be as famous as Michael Jackson, and none of us would be able to afford groceries. And I don't think that's good. Why would I say something so brave and yet so true? So I can hear you asking through the TV or the phone or whatever, that if websites like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter are giving you discoverability in exchange for, making money off of you in terms of ads and data, and YouTube is doing the same thing, what's the difference? Why isn't YouTube over here? And the reason for that is because the vetting process of what YouTube chooses to push is a lot more stringent and a lot more focused than these websites over here. These websites don't care too much about what they're actually pushing because the content is so short. It's bite-sized. If you don't like something that's put in front of you, you just move on. It's not a big deal. If a YouTube video is being pushed to you, that means that YouTube on some level thinks it's a good idea for you as the archetype viewer that you should spend, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 40 minutes or beyond looking at it. And they want you to watch videos because the longer you watch the video, the longer you give them your attention, the more ads they can sell, the more data they can collect, okay? So for the same reason, it takes a longer time for someone to grow an audience on YouTube as opposed to TikTok. That's the same reason why it's a lot better for creators once they actually get the attention of the algorithm and YouTube understands what kind of video maker you are and the kind of people that are on their website that will actually enjoy what you do. And I know that people lament the placements of ads, but let me tell you something. Unless it's a membership-based platform, unless it requires you to spend money, ads are necessary. It is the most necessary thing in the world. Even with Spotify, if you spend a monthly fee, you actually get premium Spotify. They don't give you ads. Same thing with YouTube. There's a premium YouTube. And when you pay that monthly fee, you don't get ads. It's the only way for these things to work. They give you ads so that way they can pay us, which incentivizes us to keep making videos. It's literally just a souped up, much better version than whatever the hell they got going on over here. Another thing is, I have found that if somebody had subscribed to my YouTube channel and has been watching my videos, it is much more likely that I can convince them to go to the Patreon than somebody here. And that's because just like how if I'm a part of these platforms for specific people, they take a lot of space in my brain, and the people I follow here take no space in my brain. This is kind of a middle ground. If I subscribe to a channel and I watch it, that person does take a little bit of space in my brain, enough where if I wanted more of it and, I felt like they deserved my additional support, yeah, I will consider supporting them somewhere over here. In fact, I do personally support quite a few people on these websites. So here's basically what I think you should take away from this video. If I am somebody who has a following on any of these platforms, instead of trying to get people over here where it's either, you don't pay me or you pay me, try to get them to YouTube. Try to get on YouTube and create a presence here. Because if you can get people from here to here, which is a lot easier than trying to get them to go from here to here, get them from here to here. Once they're here, get them from here to here. It's that simple. It's really just, you need to bridge the gap between this insanity and this utopia. And that's pretty much it. I think I said all I need to say. I don't have an outro.